Welcome to the 11th annual A Novel Idea. If you're looking for a good read, I recommend The Dog Stars by Peter Heller. If you don't have a copy, we'll be selling some in the lobby afterwards, and Mr. Heller will also be signing. Okay, so good evening. I'm Todd Dunkelberg, Director of the Deschutes Public Library. Thank you for joining us for the 11th A Novel Idea Read Together program. We are proud to offer this dynamic and engaging program every year for our community in Deschutes County. A Novel Idea builds community through reading and discussing one book together and participating in several cultural programs that support the book's themes. Last year, more than 6,000 of you participated in A Novel Idea. You can clap for that. Participated through going to the author programs, all of our related programs for that. This truly is about building community. When we first started A Novel Idea, the simple goal was, what if everybody read the same book and we ran into each other in the grocery store and we could start talking about that book? And the exciting piece is not only is that happening, but it's happening at a much larger scale. We've been able to tie in such programs as story times with therapy dogs, poetry workshops, fly fishing lectures, and movies, farm-to-table discussions and delicious samplings, constellation gazing at the night sky, and beautiful art displays throughout Deschutes County. That's one of the very special pieces that's grown out of A Novel Idea. Having people read the book, take their ideas from that, and creating something new. This year we've seen that through more than 50 quilt displays at QuiltWorks. Amazing quilts that really bring out so many aspects of the book and really make you look not only into the book, but how other people interpret that and it impacts them. We've had photography and art exhibits at each of our libraries throughout the month. And one of the really special pieces we had, if you could only see it, it's this great painting. It's got stars and a dog. Well, there it is. You're looking at a painting of Jasper. It was painted by Redmond artist Eric Hugen. And we were very lucky to be able to present Eric's painting to Peter Heller earlier this evening. So thank you all who participated in all those programs. I would like to personally thank the Deschutes Public Library Foundation for its leadership and continued support of A Novel Idea and several other programs for the past 21 years. Through the foundation, we're able to raise funds needed to keep our cultural programs free and open to the public. We're also happy to have the continued support of private donors like yourselves and several generous sponsors who make it possible for A Novel Idea programs and author presentations, again, to remain free for residents throughout Deschutes County. So, if you're wondering, gosh, how could I make sure this keeps happening? We have a special offer for you tonight. In your programs, we have envelopes. We'd have a simple ask. If you'd like to put in $10 in that envelope and give it back to us, we'll make sure that it gets a good home. So, the Deschutes Public Library Foundation wishes to thank our generous sponsors of the program. Bend Research has been supporting A Novel Idea for over 10 years. Thank you for your patronage. The foundation has received 3 generous grants from the Oregon Arts Commission, the local arm of the Oregon Cultural Trust, the Deschutes Cultural Coalition, and for the 9th year in a row from the Roundhouse Foundation. Thank you for those grants. And this program is generously sponsored this year by On Point Community Credit Union. Thank you, On Point. And for the 9th year in a row, we are sponsored by the E.H. and M.E. Bowerman Advised Fund of the Oregon Community Foundation. Thank you for 9 years of support. There's another very special group that the foundation would like to thank. The 5 Friends of the Library organizations in Bend, Lapine, Redmond, Sisters, and Sun River. Their donations have helped make this program possible for the last 11 years. So thank you, friends, and thank you all for buying your 25 and 50-cent books to make this possible. Yeah. We're also fortunate to have the Oregon Humanities and the Bend Bulletin, who provide in-kind media support and spread the word about a novel idea and our author-author programs. The Author-Author is a literary series that brings authors into our community. Speaking of which, we have a one-time offer for you. Tickets are now on sale for Pulitzer Prize-winning author Geraldine Brooks, who will be coming here to Bend Thursday, June 19th at Bend High. So stay tuned for that, and we will also be announcing our slate of authors for next year in July. Now, a special treat for you. We have a special surprise. Tonight we have a performance from singer, songwriter, and teacher Brad Tisdale from Sisters. As part of the Novel Idea Read Together program, and in recognition of the centennial celebration of Oregon Poet Laureate William Stafford, Brad will perform an original song and interpretation based on the Stafford poem, The Farm on the Great Plains, that opens the book, The Dog Stars. Brad Tisdale is the executive and artistic director of the Sisters Folk Festival and is a co-founder of the Americana Project and the founder of the Americana Song Academy and Sisters. Brad has a special connection to Oregon's Poet Laureate William Stafford and his family. They grew up in the same neighborhood in Portland, and Brad enjoyed having Dorothy Stafford as a 4th grade teacher. He spent years being personally inspired by Stafford's poetry, and more recently, Brad has been working closely with William Stafford's daughter, Kit Stafford, who is the Americana Project Middle School Program Director, and Kit is here tonight too, hiding somewhere amongst you. So, following Brad's performance, the Deschutes Public Library Foundation President, Sandy Freeman, will be on to introduce our author, Peter Heller. But right now, please welcome Brad to the stage.
It's a real honor to put some music to one of William Stafford's poems. Beautiful writer, very inspirational to me, and obviously to Peter. So I hope you like this. It's called The Farm on the Great Plains. Telephone line goes cold, and birds tread wherever it goes, and a farm back on a great plain tugs on the end of a line. I call that farm every year, ringing it, listening still. No one is home at the farm. The line gives only a hum. And some year I will ring that line on a night it lasts the right then I tape it for Braille from the phone on the wall. And I'll see the tenant who waits, the last one left at the place. And through the dark my Braille eye will lovingly touch his face. Hello, is mother at home? And no one is home today, but father, he should be there. No one is here. But you are the one. And then the line will be gone, 'cause both ends will be home. No space, no birds, no farm. And some year I will ring that line, on a night at last the right one, with an eye tape at for Braille from the phone on the wall. And I'll see the tenant who waits, the last one left at the place. And through the dark my Braille eye will lovingly touch his face. And myself will be the plane, and wise as winter is gray, and pure as the cold posts go, pacing toward what I know. Some year I will ring that line, on a night at last the right one, with an eye tape at for Braille from the phone on the wall. And I'll see the tenant who waits, the last one left at the place. And through the dark my Braille eye will lovingly touch his face. Yeah, through the dark my Braille eye will lovingly touch his face. Oh,
Award-winning adventure writer Peter Heller is a longtime contributor to NPR and contributing editor at Outside Magazine, Men's Journal, and National Geographic Adventure. He was raised in New York and now makes his home in Denver, Colorado. Heller has traveled the world as an expedition kayaker, writing about challenging descents in the Pamirs, the Tian Shan Mountains, the Caucasus, Central America, and Peru. In the winter of 2002, he joined the ground team for the most ambitious whitewater expedition in history. The expedition made its way through the treacherous Sangpo Gorge in eastern Tibet. He chronicled this journey in his book, Heller High Water: Surviving Tibet's Sangpo River. In 2005, on assignment for National Geographic Adventure, Heller joined the crew of a radical environmental group's eco-pirate ship. The eco-pirate ship sailed to Antarctica to disrupt a Japanese whaling fleet. In his book, The Whale Warriors: The Battle at the Bottom of the World to Save the Planet's Largest Mammals, Heller recounts fierce gales, 40-foot seas, rammings, and near sinkings. Heller's most recent memoir is Kook, What Surfing Taught Me About Love, Life, and Catching the Perfect Wave. His second novel, The Painter, will be released on May 6th. It has already received the coveted boxed and starred review from Publishers Weekly and was picked by Amazon as a top 20 spring book. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm happy to introduce to you the novel idea, 2014 author Peter Heller.
You guys have left me an emotional wreck to start this thing, from the painting that was unveiled as a surprise to the book of quilts that I just saw upstairs, to this incredible rendition of William Stafford's beautiful poem. Thank you, Brad, for that. It was so beautiful. I got to hear William Stafford read that poem in a small classroom in Iowa when I was a student there, and it stuck with me all these years. Thank you so much to Sandy and the Library Foundation, to Todd and the Deschutes Public Library, to Chantal for being such a great host, and Liz and Tina, to the sponsors, to all the book groups that have paid so much kind attention and controversial maybe attention to the book. It's such an honor to come here to Bend and be chosen by this real reading community. It's just, it's a huge honor for me, and these responses through art are just incredible. I'm gonna, you guys came to a reading, and I'm gonna read to you guys. Sorry, but you guys, I know most of you have read the book. I think there's something wonderful about hearing hearing fiction in the voice of the person that wrote it, and you can sort of hear Higgs' voice as I heard it. And I don't think we get read to enough as adults. One of my favorite things as a little kid was when my dad put me to bed every night. He read to me, and he often read to me poems that were probably over my head. I remember he read, when I was 6, he read E.E. Cummings to me. Some of them I really didn't get, but this one I did. I can still remember. Remember Buffalo Bill's defunct, who used to ride a silver water-smooth stallion and break 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 pigeons just like that. Jesus, he was a handsome man. And what I want to know is, how do you like your blue-eyed boy, Mr. Death? Well, at 6 years old. I also want to thank, I forgot to thank, because this is just so huge. I want to thank Eric Hugens for this incredible painting. This is going, so Sirius in the Dog Star constellation is literally portrayed in the sky there. It's just incredible. It's going right up on I'm taking down the picture of the, well, it's by my dad's wife. I better not talk about it. So I'm going to start reading. What I'm going to do is I'm going to start at the beginning. I'm going to read a little bit of the beginning. I'm going to read a scene with Jasper because we all want that. I'm going to read a scene with Bangley because Bangley's Bangley. We just can't ignore him. And then I'm going to tell you a little bit about how this novel got written, because the path to writing fiction and writing this novel is a little bit different than most novelists, I would bet. So, The Dog Stars, 1. I keep the beast running. I keep the 100 low lead on tap. I foresee attacks. I am young enough. I am old enough. I used to love to fish for trout more than almost anything. My name is Hig, one name. Big Hig, if you need another. If I ever woke up crying in the middle of a dream, and I'm not saying I did, it's because the trout are gone, every one. Brookies, rainbows, browns, cutthroats, cutbows, every one. The tiger left, the elephant, the apes, the baboon, the cheetah, the titmouse, the frigate bird, the pelican, gray, the whale, gray, the collared dove, sad, but didn't cry until the last trout swam upriver looking for maybe cooler water. Melissa, my wife, was an old hippie. Not that old. She looked good. In this story, she might have been Eve, but I'm not Adam. I am more like Cain. They didn't have a brother like me. Did you ever read the Bible? I mean, sit down and read it like it was a book? Check out Lamentations. That's where we're at, pretty much lamenting, pretty much pouring our hearts out like water. They said at the end it would get colder after it gets warmer, way colder, still waiting. She's a surprise, this old earth. One big surprise after another since before she separated from the moon, who circles and circles like the mate of a shot goose. No more geese. A few. Last October, I heard the old bleating after dusk and saw them, 5 against the cold, blood-washed blue over the ridge, 5 all fall, I think. Next April, none. I hand-pumped the 100 low-lead aviation gas out of the old airport tank when the sun is not shining, and I have the truck, too, that was making the fuel delivery, more fuel than the beast can burn in my lifetime, if I keep my sorties local, which I plan to. I have to. She's a small plane, a 1956 Cessna 182, really a beaut. Cream and blue. I'm figuring I'm dead before the beast gives up the final ghost. I will buy the farm. 80 acres of bottomland, hay and corn, in a country where there is still a cold stream coming out of the purple mountains, full of brookies and cuts. Before that, I will make my round trips out and back. So, as you guys know, Hig sleeps out every night by the berm with Jasper, and he does it even though there are a lot of McMansions and houses around this little country airport, because sleeping inside, he tried it, but it made him feel too sad. And he feels like if he sleeps outside under a pile of quilts again, it's funny about the quilts because these quilts are so amazing, and I always tell readers, and sometimes when I read, that Jasper had more quilts than any dog in history. He's got the Who from Whoville quilt and the dog shoe. Anyway, so but he sleeps out because maybe he can pretend it's sort of provisional, it's temporary, and maybe one morning he could just roll up his blankets and go home, and his wife would be there, and his daughter. So now I don't have to sleep on the ground. We have our system. We are confident. The fear is like a memory of nausea. You can't remember how bad it was, or that you just about asked to die instead. But I do sleep on the ground, under a pile of blankets in winter that must weigh 20 pounds. I like it, not boxed in. I still sleep behind the berm. I still leave the porch light on. Jasper still curls against my legs, still dreams and whimpers, still trembles under his own blanket. But I think he is mostly deaf now and useless as an alarm, which we will never let on to Bangley. Bangley, you just don't know with him. He harbors, might resent the meat I share, who knows? The way he sees it, everything has a use. I once had a book on the stars, but now I don't. My memory serves, but not stellar. Ha! So I made up constellations. I made a bear and a goat, but maybe not where they're supposed to be. I made some for the animals that once were, the ones I know about. I made one for Melissa, her whole self standing there, kind of smiling and tall, looking down on me in the winter nights, looking down while frost crinkles in my eyelashes and feathers in my beard. I made one for the little angel. Melissa and I lived on a lake in Denver. Sometimes back then, fishing with Jasper up the Sulphur, I hit my limit. I mean, it felt my heart might just burst. Bursting is different than breaking. Like there was no way to contain how beautiful. Not it either, not just beauty, something about how I fit. This little bend of smooth stones, the leaning cliffs, the smell of spruce, the small cutthroat making quiet rings in the black water of a pool, and no need to thank even, just be, just fish. Just walk up the creek, get dark, get cold. It is all of a piece of me somehow. Melissa part of the same circle, but different because we are entrusted with certain souls. Like I could hold her carefully in my cupped hands, like to bear her carefully, carefully, the country I cannot, but her I can. And maybe all along, it was she holding me. The hospital, St. Vincent's, was right across the lake. The orange helicopters landed there. At the end, we talked about flying west, but it was too late, and there was the hospital. We went to the hospital, to one of the buildings they took over, filling with the dead. So, Jasper, I got an email from a woman, and it just said, "Dear Mr. Heller, Jasper just died. What should I do?" I said that we could all die that happy. I mean, with someone we loved at night in our sleep, after a good fish meal, and after a long life. And I told her to keep reading. Jasper used to be able to jump up into the cockpit. Now he can't. In the 4th year, we had an argument. I took out the front passenger seat for weight and cargo and put down a flannel sleeping bag with a pattern of a man shooting a pheasant over and over, his dog on 3 legs, pointing out in front. How many people have had that sleeping bag? Yeah, I know, me too. Not sure why I didn't do that before. The dog doesn't look like Jasper still. I carried him. Lay him on the pattern of the man and the dog. You and me in another life, I tell him. He likes to fly anyway. I wouldn't leave him alone with Bangley. When I took out the seat, he got depressed. He couldn't sit up and look out. He knows to stay back of the rudder pedals. Once in his sheer, he skidded into them and nearly killed us. After that, I fashioned like a 4-inch wood fence, but scrapped it after he inspected it and jumped out of the plane and refused to fly, no shit. It insulted him, the whole thing. I used to worry about the engine roar and prop blast. I wear the headset even though there was no one to talk to on the radio because it dampens the noise, but I worried about Jasper, even tried to make him his own hearing protector, this helmet kind of thing. It wouldn't stay on. Probably why he's mostly deaf now. When I picked up oil, etc., I moved the quilt to the top of the stack so he could look out. "See," I said, "at least it's good half the time. Better than most of us can expect." He still thought it was lame, I could tell. Not half as excited. So now, when I'm not picking up, just flying, which is most of the time, I bolt the seat back in. It just takes a few minutes. Not like we don't have time. First time, he sat up straight again and glanced at me like, "What took you so long?" Then looked forward, real serious, brow furrowed like a co-pilot. His mood, it lifted, palpable as weather. He's getting old. I don't count the years. I don't multiply by 7. They bred dogs for everything else, even diving for fish. Why didn't they breed them to live longer, to live as long as a man? And thank you. And I'm going to finish the reading with, and I'll read one last little page at the very end, but I'm going to finish with Bangley because he's some people's favorites. I think those people probably need more therapy. But I do know a lot of people like Bangley. I've lived in rural Colorado for many years, and in Vermont, and New Hampshire, and Maine, and West Virginia. And these guys would be sorely disappointed if the apocalypse didn't come. And so, and we know that Bangley is really good. Well, he says that he's really good at just one thing, which is shooting people at long range. And Hig does everything else around the place, right? I mean, he's the eyes. He flies. He fixes stuff. He does the gardening. He hunts, and he can cook. And so Bangley comes over at about dinner 30 to the hangar. Often Bangley wanders over and joins me. He can't cook, I can. Can't train the man to knock ever, or at least not whisper in like some ghost, which creeps me out a little because I never know how long he's been watching. Dinner early tonight. Fuck, Bangley, I nearly scalded myself. You cook like you enjoy it. Huh? The way you move around with the skillet, the knife, like it's a kitchen, like it's one of those cooking shows. Bangley's nostrils flare with a gill-like rhythm when he's particularly enjoying himself. I stare at him for just a moment. You hungry? Like one of those cooking shows where they tie on an apron like cooking a friggin' dinner is some kind of dance. Tra-la-la. I put a pan full of fresh new potatoes down on the stove. In the beginning, I tried using venison fat for lard, but it went rancid so fast. Well, I'm not wearing an apron, as you can see, and I'm not dancing. Almost no oil in the pantries of houses at the end. The last few months, they must have been drinking it for the calories. Then, in the basement of a big bow house across on Piper Lane, I found 2 5-gallon barrels of olive oil, hidden behind a stack of new bricks. You were singing, though. He flashes that straight-across grin, just makes him look meaner. The stove is hot with Canadian fir 2x4s, the best frying wood for flash heat. The oil is spitting, and I prod at the cut potatoes until most of them are in contact with the bottom of the pan. With a steel spatula, I reach down and joggle the chrome lever that closes the side vent to the stove to slow it down. I think, if I were made of different stuff, if I thought I could defend this place myself, I would shoot Bangley where he stands and get it over with. Would I? Maybe. And then I would miss this sparring every day, probably feel it like a big void. We really have become like a married couple. I don't think I was singing, I say finally. You were, Hig, you were. Wasn't Johnny Cash either, he grins, like that was the only approved sing-to-yourself music in the book of Bangley. Well, what the fuck was it? He shrugs. Hell if I know, some pop girl stuff from the radio I distantly recall. Distantly recall. Standing there with a smile of triumph in his scruffy, weak old beard, I swear, I start to laugh. That's what he does to me, aggravate me all the way to the point of laughter, to the point of ridiculous, and then a fuse pops, flicks a switch, and I laugh. Lucky for both of us, I guess. Sit down, Bangley. Pull up a stool. We're having catfish, dandelion salad with basil, new potatoes, oh something, not gratin. See, he says, just like one of those shows. If you aren't just a little light in the loafers, I look at him, I laugh harder. Thank you. So I just want to tell you how I came to writing this novel. As I said, my dad read poetry to me when I was really little, and I wanted to be a poet most of my childhood. And then since this is a library thing, I want to tell you about a librarian. I was 11, and I was in my school library, a small school, and this is in Brooklyn, New York. And I wandered in, and the librarian, her name was Annie Bosworth, and she was English, and I would have married her just for the way she said my name. She said, Peter, it's like thump, thump, thump. Are you looking for something to read? I was like, yeah. And a great librarian, they just know. They know what you're ready for. And she brought me over to the fiction shelf, and she pulled out Hemingway's In Our Time, that slim book of short stories, the early Nick Adams stories in Upper Michigan, mostly. And I took it home, and I read it, and okay, so I'm 11 years old, and I'm in Brooklyn, and my jaw fell open. I was like, holy cow. I want to do that. I want to hop off a freight in upper Michigan in a burned out forest and hike for miles and come to this gorgeous river and make camp and make cowboy coffee. I didn't know what that was, but it sounded really good. And I wanted to burn my tongue just like Nick. And then I wanted to fish for the most beautiful trout in the world. I wanted to have a girlfriend that could row and fish like a man and then break up with her. I never understood why Nick broke up with her, and I came to the conclusion later that it was because she was too good for him. But I intuitively wanted that. As a young boy, I wanted to break up with someone who's too good for me. I think I probably did a couple of times. And mostly I wanted to write about it all the way Hemingway did. It just moved me so much. And so I did everything. Like I began to really attack this thing, with a passion. Started to do everything that you're supposed to do. I copied out stories and poems by great writers. And I heard that Jack London put words he didn't know up on the wall, little index cards. I did that. I read the dictionary, and probably something no wholesome all-American young boy should do in his spare time, but I did it. And I did all that stuff, and then I became an English major, and then I got out of college. And they didn't tell me, at the English department at Dartmouth that you can't make a living being a poet, which was kind of mean of them, I thought, don't you? So, my buddy Landis, Bert Hinckley knows Landis. He was a wonderful kayaker, and the other thing I picked up in college, besides the inability to make a living, was kayaking. I love to kayak. So Landis said, "Look, I got a house in Boulder. It's cheap. There's a cheap room. Come out and share it with me, and we'll just go paddling all the time. You can get some job." So I came out. I got some job, which was delivering pizza, and I was really good at it. Stop sign, stoplight, forget about it. It's like, and I taught kayaking, and I guided rivers, and I wrote in my room. I wrote short stories and poetry. And one day, my friend Sasha said, we were skiing one day, and he said, "Why don't you combine your passions? Why don't you paddle and write, and why don't you write for Outside Magazine?" And this was in like 1985, and Outside was pretty new and everything. And the great thing about being young and dumb is that you don't know what you can't do. So I went down to the magazine store, and I got a copy of Outside, and I flipped to the masthead, and I picked out a senior editor's name who sounded nice. It just had a Laura Hanhold, and it's one of those Dutch names. She has like 5 H's in her last name. I still don't know where to put them all. And I called her up. Well, no, I called Outside. I got the 800 number, and I called, and the receptionist said, "Outside Magazine." I said, "Could I speak to Laura Hanhold, please?" And I said it, really deep in my voice and sounded authoritative, And she's like, phone rang, and she picked up. And then there was like this gasp, and then I started talking really fast. And I said, I had a short story published in Harper's, and that was sort of true. What I'd had published was a reprint of a little short story I'd written for my college journal that in that reading section up front in Harper's. It was little, but, I'd published in Harper's. And I said, "Look, I kayak class 5, and I think you guys should send me on this expedition to China, to the Tibetan Plateau." And there was this long pause, and then she said, "I'm going to take a chance on you. We've heard about this expedition. It was the first descent of a river off the edge of the Tibetan Plateau." And she said, "We don't have any writers that can kayak class 5, and So I'm going to send you, and if you write a good story, I'm going to send you, and I'm going to pay half your expenses. If you write a good story that we publish, I'll pay the other half, and I'll buy the story from you. And what I realized later was that I was dispensable. I mean, you know, the other writers in their stable, you know, they had more invested in those guys. And so I went, and it was all professional river runners except for a very athletic couple that liked to canoe, and it was going to be 2 paddle rafts of 7 people each, and then 3 of us in kayaks. And so they split up the couple that couldn't, that weren't pros, and we decided to go do a training run on a river in western Sichuan. And I remember we were driving up the river, and the river just looked, it had a beautiful rhythm to it. It was like class 3-4, no big deal. And as we got to the put-in and got our gear together, it started raining upstream, and you could see big storm, dark storm clouds, and the river began to rise. And by the time we all put on, it was pretty raucous. And I remember it was more than raucous, I guess. And I remember I was surfing a wave, and I peeled off, and I came around a corner, and I saw a raft doing cartwheels in a big hydraulic at the bottom of a ledge, and it was empty. And that is not something you want to see as a paddler. So I sprinted ahead, and I saw a helmet in the current, and I paddled towards it, and I couldn't reach it in time, and it went into a log jam on the left bank. And log jams are like the worst thing in a river because they sift the water and things get stuck against them. And I hit the shore. I almost went into the log jam myself, and I got out and I ran down, and right behind me was this guy Scott from Sheridan, Wyoming. He was one of the other kayakers, and we got out on the logs, and there were 2 helmets stuck in this wedge of logs. And we grabbed the outer one's life jacket, and we hauled him across the logs onto the bank, and he was still alive, and he was one of the Chinese guys. And we went back for the next one, and we pulled, and he was stuck. And he said, "My left foot." And we looked around, and it was Dave, and it was one of the couple, and they were on their honeymoon. And we tried to pull him out, and then we put a Z-drag on him, which is a very powerful pulley system you use with carabiners and a safety rope, and he wouldn't budge, and the river was rising, and we held his head above the water, and eventually the river rose over his head, and he died in our arms. And we had to tell his new wife, and he was cremated the next day. The next morning it took 50 Tibetans to break the logjam apart. And he was cremated, and she left with his ashes. And the next day after that, we had a ceremony by the river, and we sang Amazing Grace, which is often what you do when you don't know what else to do. And I had decided that I had a book of Chinese poetry with me, Tang Dynasty Chinese poetry. And I always did that ever after that. Whenever I was on an assignment to a foreign country or any place, I would bring a book of poetry with me from that place. I thought it was a good way to connect with the soul of a place. And so I read a poem by the river. And then the Chinese canceled our permit for the river, and we ended up spending 2 weeks driving around on this grasslands that had herders. No Westerner had been allowed in there since 1959. And they had herders, yak herders, who lived in yurts, who carried them on travois like the Sioux. It was like the Great Plains in 1870. It was really incredible. It was dreamlike, and we were all sort of traumatized. And I got home, I called Laura up, and I said, "Hey, I'm sorry, I can't write your story." And she said, "What?" And I said, "Well, it's supposed to be a fun adventure for your, February adventure package. I can't do it." And she said, "What happened?" I started talking, and like 45 minutes later, she hadn't made a peep. I finished, and I was clearly, venting, and she said, "You go write it, and just go write it." And that ended up being their submission for the National Magazine Award that year. And it was a very odd way to begin a career in journalism. And I knew that if I didn't paddle something hard right away that I probably wouldn't ever again. So I took an assignment from Playboy, believe it or not, to go on a Kiwi Russian expedition to the High Pamirs to run it was then the very end of the Soviet Union, what the Soviets called the Everest of rivers, and it's called the Muksu, and the last team that had tried it had lost 5 of their 11 men. And it was going to be this big Russian float, which is this huge thing, and a couple of, and it was a New Zealand, it was a Kiwi Russian expedition, so the New Zealanders were in paddle rafts, and then 2 of us were kayaking and kind of guiding out ahead. And it was the perfect antidote for the China trip because, first of all, Kiwis and Russians are like oil and water. I mean, you get to a tough rapid, and the Russians, like a really tough rapid, and the Russians are like squatting, and they like start smoking cigarettes. They start like chain smoking, and they get really grim, and it's like the weight of history, And the Kiwis are hopping along the bank, going, "Oh, she'll be right, mate. No, I see a line, no worries." Like they're like that. And the guy that had to mediate between these was Vanya, and he was the translator, and he'd learned his English from Frank Zappa records. And so he could sing, all about, Quinn the Eskimo and the yellow snow and all that. He was awesome. Like, he was a guide in this area, very remote. And he said that last year he'd been in guiding a team of geologists, and they'd been camping on a drainage just over the ridge from an international team of scientists led by a French guy looking for Yeti. And Vanya said, Pete, so one night I cut out from plywood, from raft floor, I cut out Yeti track, Yeti foot, and make handle. And then I go along moraine by creek and snowbank, and I make like this. He said, Pete, next day they discovered tracks, make international headlines. But only one problem, was only left feet. I guess they didn't notice, but Vanya was awesome. And another crazy, sort of crazy quirk of the trip was that one of the leaders of the Russian team had been the contractor who built the American embassy that was riddled with bugs. Do you remember that? So one night I kayaked, we'd been surfing a wave, and I came into camp late, and he said, "Oh, Pete, I help you set up your tent." I was like, "Oh, no." He said, "I am a normal man." I'm like, "Yeah, right." So anyway, it was a perfect antidote. And what happened was that sort of launched a career in adventure journalism. And then as I did more stories, it became very apparent to me that the ecosphere was unraveling really fast. And I'd go around the world, and I'd go snorkeling in a place that I'd been snorkeling 10 years before, and the reef was bleached, and there weren't any fish anymore. And I saw that story happen in lots of ways all around the world, and I began writing more environmental stories. But in the back of my mind was this idea of writing fiction. And 3 years ago, I thought I had like 9 months out ahead where I didn't have to take a story. And I wanted badly to, when I wrote nonfiction, I always knew what was going to happen. I knew what the ending was going to be because it happened. And I just wanted that experience of like paddling a river and coming around a corner and not knowing what was going to be there. It could be, a waterfall or a pool or like a cougar drinking or 9 guys with bows and arrows if you're on the right river. And I wanted that thrill. I wanted to be surprised again in my writing. So I called my best friend from high school. His name Carlton Hughes, and he became the showrunner and executive producer for the show Lost, which has like 8 running plots at the same time. And he's a really good friend, and he's responsible for the ending. And I won't give you his email, but I called him up and I said, "Hey, Carltoni, do you know any novelists? Do you work with any novelists who just start with the first line and let it rip and have no clue, like don't plot, don't even know what they're writing?" And he didn't hesitate. To my surprise, he didn't even hesitate. He said, I work with Stephen King. Oftentimes he starts with the first line, has no clue. It's a voice, it's a character, it's a place, and then it's a situation, and then it's a story. And he said Elmore Leonard, too, which really surprised me. You know, those tightly plotted crime novels in South Florida. And, but it kind of gave me permission. It was like, okay. And I went, and I sat down, I went to my coffee shop, and I started writing first person, a voice, and it was about a 17-year-old girl who could fly at night, like this. And I was having a lot of fun, but I began to feel out of my depth. And I don't have kids, and so I particularly don't know how 17-year-olds think or what they care about. And I don't know about flying like this. And so I got about like a fifth of the way through the novel in like a month. I mean, I was writing in like a white heat, and I thought, better get a reality check. So I went to my friend Helen, who's a wonderful author, to her kitchen. I started reading, and I read like half an hour. I stopped, and I said, what do you think? And she said, it's so great you're writing fiction. And you know, your sentences are really great. And she took a deep breath, and she said, maybe this isn't the one. And, you know, your best friends are the ones that tell you you have spinach in your teeth. They really are. I mean, they are the ones that have the courage to stand up and tell you something that's going to make you cry. So 3 days later, I went to the coffee shop and I started. I sat down, I wrote, I keep the beast running. I keep the 100 low lead on tap. I foresee attacks. And a few lines later, the voice said, my name is Hig, one name. Big Hig if you need another. If I ever woke up crying in the middle of a dream, and I'm not saying I did, it's because the trout are gone, every one. And as soon as he said that, I was like, okay, I'm listening. And he started speaking, he kept talking. And about 3 pages in, I realized that this was a post-apocalyptic novel. And I went, fuck. I don't want to write a post-apocalyptic novel. I mean, for one, I don't want to write a genre novel because I want to write literary fiction. I mean, you know, I want to get respect. And two, if it ever gets published, they're going to compare it right away to The Road and Cormac McCarthy. And as a first-time novelist, you do not want to get compared to Cormac McCarthy. That's like really what you don't want to do. But I realized that it was a different project. I mean, Hig, you know, I'd already laughed by page 4 or something a couple of times, and there was like a joy of life in there that you know, wasn't in The Road. It wasn't so bleak, so I kept going. And I think what I'll do now, I want to take some questions because that's the most fun, and then I'm just going to read one more page at the end. And so don't be shy because this is the funnest part. And you can heckle me too, I don't care. Yeah. Any chance for a sequel? It's really interesting about sequels. So you guys have all read the book. Hig is lying out there under the berm, under the stars with Seema. And I really like him there. I mean, you know, I sleep easy knowing he's there with her, and sort of Pops and Bangley are sort of like the benign, you know, like protectors. And I don't know. I mean, I'm not that interested. But then I think, how cool is it that the Arabs were flying over? And I think if I were them, I mean, okay, so if I'm from Kuwait or, you know, United Arab Emirates, I'm from a tribal culture that was immune to the flu, I would have, first of all, I'd have oil, I'd have refineries, I'd have engineers, I'd have teachers, I'd have soldiers, I'd have farmers. And I would get in Boeing 747s and I'd go to Santa Barbara. Wouldn't you? And so I think they probably went over there somewhere. You know, we're close to the Central Valley where they could farm and where they had access to the ocean and fish and stuff. And that makes Hig and Bangley the Native Americans. And then I foresee this sort of like Red Dawn kind of like book where, you know, but I don't know. I mean, so it really depends if Higgs starts talking again. And it wouldn't surprise me if he does. But in the meantime, as soon as I finished Dog Stars, I dove right into the next novel because I had this feeling. Have you guys ever played pool and you make a shot and before you even like hit the cue ball, you know it's going in? That's the way it felt with the Dog Stars. I just felt like Higg, it was so cool. Like Higg told me the story like he was sitting across the campfire. And I felt like it was his story. And I felt like it was cool and that people were going to like it. And I thought, I better start the next one because it's going to be some clamor. And the sophomore effort is really different. I mean, I had second novel syndrome big time. And I should just tell you that because I know there's writers in the room, but you know, during the Dog Stars, I just thought the whole time, I thought, don't think, don't think, don't think, just listen. And Denver Post gave me a Top Thinker Award, which is like this little plaque. And my wife holds it up, and she goes, when I do something stupid, Top Thinker, you know, it's like. But I swear, I really tried not to think, which is ironic. And in the second book, I was thinking, I was like, what should he do next? And, you know, should there be a brother? Okay, there's a brother. And, you know, should he go to Santa Fe? And, like, what, you know, and I was like, and I thought also, I was thinking, well, if I'm thinking, it can't be any good because the Dog Stars was completely, like, channeled. And so this novel, The Painter, can't be that good. And I was, like, in the throes of this, in the middle, sort of in the middle of the book. And I went to Paonia, where I have a place, and it's the setting for The Painter. It's mentioned in the Dog Stars. It's in West Slope, Colorado. It's a very beautiful valley. And it has one coffee shop with an espresso machine. And in there is a table, you know, one big table in the middle. And you're going to talk to anybody who's in there. And who was in there was Paolo Bacigalupi, who's this, like, amazing science fiction writer. He wrote, you know, Shipbreakers and Wind Up Girl. He's won Hugo Awards and everything. And he's young and handsome. And I pretty much hated him. But I'd watched him grow up since he was a little tyke. But, you know, he's an incredible writer. And I was telling him about this challenge, and he said, hey, let me tell you a story. And he leaned forward and he said, I wrote 2 short stories. One, I completely channeled, fugue state. I, like, woke up, it was finished. I sent it in, it won an award, and I love it. Second story, I designed the whole thing, I engineered it, I designed every character to interact a certain way in every scene, I plotted every minute, I sent it in, it won an award, and I love it. And now I look at him, I love them both, and I can't tell the difference. And he leaned forward a little further and he said, your job is just to make sure it doesn't suck. And it was like the whole burden of this second novel just lifted. It was like, oh yeah, I can do that. You know, what he was basically saying was rely on your craft. I mean, use your revision. You know, you can bush hog out the bad stuff and, you know, rearrange things and just make sure to. So that's what I did. And now I actually love The Painter. And so it'll be on sale Tuesday.